The flash drive burns in my palm. Proof of everything. Vance's security guard just spotted me, his radio crackling with orders to stop me at any cost. I have 30 seconds before they lock down the building, and my only way out is through the fire escape. But my hands are shaking because the man who ruined my life isn't just my professor anymore. He's about to become my stepfather. The server room door slams shut behind me. I'm trapped. The evidence is here, but so is he. And he's not letting me walk away. The air in Julian Vance's office tasted of expensive cedar and ozone. Maya Sterling stood before the mahogany desk, her heels sinking into the plush Persian rug. Sunlight lanced through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes that danced around Julian's silver hair. He didn't invite her to sit. Instead, he flipped through a manila folder, the crisp snap of paper echoing against the soundproofed walls. Maya gripped the strap of her satchel until the leather bit into her palm. Her pulse thrummed against her collarbone. Julian finally looked up, his eyes two chips of flint behind rimless spectacles. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the polished wood. "The university values discretion, Maya," Julian said. His voice carried the smooth resonance of a cello. "This ethics complaint you filed, it lacks the nuance required for a doctoral candidate of your caliber. I provided the time-stamped records, Dean Vance," Maya replied. Her voice wavered, then steadied. "The data manipulation is clear. The grant money isn't where the ledger says it is." Julian chuckled, a dry sound like dead leaves skittering on pavement. He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was a disciplinary notice. "Plagiarism is a serious charge. If these records originated from a restricted area you lacked permission to access, your dissertation ends today." The room shrunk. The scent of cedar turned cloying, suffocating. Julian's smile remained fixed, a predatory curve. He tapped his fountain pen against the desk. Click, click, click. "Consider the optics," he whispered. "A brilliant student throwing away a decade of work over a misunderstanding. Go home, sleep on it, or don't come back Monday." Maya stepped out of the office, her mind a frantic swarm of calculations. She reached the stairwell and began her ritual. 1, 2, 3. Her voice was a low, rhythmic whisper. The numbers were the only thing keeping the floor from falling out from under her. By the time she hit 24 at the ground floor, her jaw was set. Julian wasn't just a corrupt academic. He was a threat to her entire future. She needed more than just a complaint. She needed leverage. She needed to see the raw data before he could scrub it. The university's restricted financial archives were located in the basement of the North Wing, a place that smelled of recycled plastic and the sharp ozone tang of high-end cooling systems. Maya met Sarah Johnson near the service entrance. Sarah's fingers were moving in the air, tapping out invisible sequences on a phantom keyboard. "You're late by 4 minutes and 12 seconds, Sarah whispered, her neon-pink hair glowing under the dim hallway lights. "Sorry, I shouldn't have pointed that out. I'll add it to the log." She pulled out her phone, her thumb dancing over a spreadsheet titled "Apology Log." "Doesn't matter," Maya said, her eyes scanning the corridor. "Can you get us through the digital lock?" "The security is like a giant steel door with no handle," Sarah said, her eyes widening with a mix of terror and excitement. "But every door has a hinge. Give me 30 seconds. They slipped into the archive room. It was a forest of black metal towers, humming with a low-frequency vibration that Maya felt in her teeth. Sarah pulled a small device from her pocket and plugged it into a port. On her tablet, lines of glowing text began to scroll. The attack is like 1,000 fists pounding on the door at once, Sarah whispered, her face pale in the screen's glow. It's overwhelming, the system's ability to ask for a password. And we're in. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard. She wasn't looking for names, she was looking for the flow. Money was like water. It always left a trail of dampness. She found it. A series of transfers, disguised as equipment maintenance, flowing into an offshore account. She jammed a flash drive into the slot. The metal bit into her thumb, a sharp reminder of the stakes. 40%. 60%. Maya whispered. The progress bar moved with agonizing slowness. Suddenly, the heavy thud of a boot echoed from the hallway. Thump, thump, thump. Someone's coming, Sarah hissed, her reflection in the monitor showing eyes wide with panic. I'm sorry. I didn't see the patrol schedule change. I'll add it. Shut up and hide, Maya commanded. The door swung open with a groan of ungreased hinges. A beam of light from a heavy industrial flashlight cut through the darkness, sweeping over the metal cabinets. It caught the edge of Maya's glasses. Who's there? A gravelly voice demanded. It was Kevin Wilson, a man with a buzz cut and a scar running through his left eyebrow. He stepped into the room, his hand resting on the heavy black baton at his belt. Maya didn't wait. She lunged from behind the server rack. Kevin was massive, a wall of muscle, but Maya had the momentum of desperation. She collided with him, the scent of stale coffee and cheap cigarettes filling her lungs. Kevin grunted, his hand flying to the scar on his eyebrow, a reflex of old pain, before he grabbed Maya's arm. His grip was like a vice, cold and unyielding. Let go, Maya shrieked. She twisted, using her weight to pull him off balance. They crashed into a metal shelf, a shower of paper and dust raining down on them. The air smelled of scorched dust. Maya felt a sharp pain in her ribs as she hit the floor. But she saw the flash drive. It had finished. She snatched it from the port. Kevin reached for her again, but Maya kicked out, her heavy heel catching him in the shin. He roared in pain, momentarily loosening his grip. Maya scrambled to her feet, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Sarah, run! They bolted past him, their footsteps echoing like gunshots in the sterile corridor. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of the parking lot, the cold night air stinging Maya's lungs. She clutched the flash drive in her fist, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. She had it. The proof. She drove home to their small house in Lexington, her mind already drafting the sequence of events she would present to the board. She needed to be precise. She needed to be perfect. When she pushed open the front door, the house smelled of roasting lamb and expensive perfume. The warm, yellow light of the foyer felt wrong. Her mother, Mary, was standing at the top of the stairs, her hair perfectly coiffed for once, her pale skin glowing. Maya, is that you, dear? Mary's voice rose at the end, making the statement a question. She was wearing a silk dress Maya hadn't seen before. Mom, what's going on? Maya asked, her hand still tight on the flash drive in her pocket. We have wonderful news. Truly wonderful? Mary descended the stairs, her movements fluttering and uncertain. She reached the bottom and took Maya's hands. Her palms were damp. Julian is here. He's been so helpful with the taxes and the roof repairs. He's such a savior. Maya felt the world tilt. Julian? Julian Vance is here? From the kitchen, Julian stepped into the light. He had removed his suit jacket, his silk shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms covered in fine silver hair. He held a bottle of expensive red wine in one hand and a corkscrew in the other. Maya, he said, his voice a smooth, predatory purr. "I hope you don't mind. Your mother and I decided there was no point in waiting." Mary beamed, clutching Julian's arm. "We're engaged, Maya? Isn't it just like a dream?" Julian looked at Maya, his eyes glinting with a cold, triumphant light. He began to crack his knuckles, pop, 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 starting with the left pinky. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. Maya looked at her mother's radiant, oblivious face, then back at the man who now held the keys to their home. She wasn't just fighting for her career anymore. She was fighting for her mother's life. The next 2 weeks were a slow-motion invasion. Julian moved his mahogany furniture and his scent of sandalwood into the house, displacing the familiar smells of Mary's lavender and lemon wax. He installed a new security system, a gift, he called it, that hummed with a low, constant electronic drone. Every door now had a sleek, black sensor that glowed with a predatory red eye. "It's for your safety, Maya," Julian said one evening, tapping the screen of his phone. "Lexington isn't what it used to be. This way, I can ensure the perimeter is secure from anywhere." Maya watched him. She knew what he was doing. He was building a digital cage. Every time she moved from the kitchen to her bedroom, she heard the soft click hiss of the locks engaging. She felt like a specimen under a microscope. She knew she had to act before the wedding. She scheduled a meeting with Dean Michael Davis. She would go over Julian's head. She would present the data from the flash drive and end this. Dean Davis's office was a tomb of dark wood and stifling heat. The thermostat was set to 82 degrees, making Maya's blouse stick to her skin. The dean sat behind his desk, humming a low, buzzing funeral dirge under his breath. He didn't look at Maya. He looked at the blank brass plaque on his wall. "Dean Davis, I have the evidence," Maya said, her voice trembling with a mix of heat exhaustion and nerves. She placed the flash drive on his desk. "This contains the records of the grant money Julian Vance has been diverting. It's all here. The offshore accounts, the forged signatures." The dean didn't touch the drive. He continued to hum, the sound vibrating through the heavy air. Finally, he looked at her, his eyes cold and calculating. "Subverted Phase 1. Smart decision." Maya felt a surge of confidence. She had prepared for this. She had the data, the timestamps, and the legal statutes memorized. She had bypassed the university's best security to get this information. "If you look at the third folder," she said, her voice gaining strength, "you'll see the direct correlation between the equipment budget cuts and the deposits into the Vance Holdings account. It's a closed loop of theft." "I've done the work, Dean. The institution's reputation depends on you seeing this." She felt a sense of righteous pride. She was being the professional, the academic, the truth seeker. This was the logical, smart move, taking the evidence to the highest authority. Phase 2. False positive. Dean Davis stopped humming. He picked up the flash drive, turning it over in his manicured fingers. He looked at Maya and gave a small, weary nod. "You've been very thorough, Maya. It takes a certain kind of dedication to go to these lengths." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I appreciate your loyalty to the university. It's rare to find a student so concerned with the integrity of our finances." He placed the drive in his drawer. "I'll have the internal auditors look at this immediately. Go home, Maya. Take a breath. You've done your part." Maya felt a wave of relief so intense it made her dizzy. Her shoulders dropped. The heat in the room seemed to lessen. She had done it. She had won. Phase 3. The crack, she stood up to leave. But as she reached for the door handle, she heard a sound. It was the pop, pop, pop of knuckles cracking. She turned back. Dean Davis wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the door to his private washroom. The door opened, and Julian Vance stepped out, drying his hands on a silk handkerchief. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't angry. He was smiling, that same predatory curve he had used in his office. A cold prickle danced across Maya's skin. Why was he here? Why was the dean not reacting? Phase 4, full collapse. "Thank you, Michael," Julian said, his voice smooth as oil. He walked over to the desk and took the flash drive out of the drawer. "I told you she'd bring it eventually. Her need for perfect proof is so predictable." Maya's heart stopped. What? What is this?" Dean Davis looked at her, his expression shifting from weary to disgusted. "What this is, Maya, is a tragedy. Julian warned me weeks ago that your obsession with him was taking a dark turn. He told me you were suffering from a break from reality, delusions of persecution. I have the data," Maya screamed, pointing at the drive in Julian's hand. "You have a drive filled with fabricated documents that you obtained by illegally accessing restricted servers," Julian said. He held up a manila folder, the same one from his office. "I've already filed the report. The security logs show your ID was used to bypass the firewall. The files on that drive, I've already had them analyzed. They're clumsy forgeries, Maya. An attempt to blackmail a faculty member because you couldn't handle the nuance of your dissertation. That's a lie. Is it?" Julian leaned in, the scent of sandalwood overwhelming. "The dean has already signed the papers. You aren't just being expelled, Maya. We're recommending a mandatory psychiatric evaluation. If you try to use this evidence anywhere else, the university will sue you for defamation and pursue criminal charges for the archive break-in. You didn't find leverage, child. You handed me the rope to hang you with." Maya stumbled back, the world spinning. She had lost everything. Her career, her reputation, her only weapon. She was no longer a student. She was a problem to be managed. And Julian was the one holding the leash. She fled the office, the dean's low, buzzing hum following her into the hall, like the sound of a swarm of flies. Maya sat in her car in the university parking lot, her forehead resting against the cool plastic of the steering wheel. She needed to think. She needed a new variable. Julian had anticipated her academic approach, her reliance on the system. To beat him, she had to step outside the lines. She called Sarah. "I need to meet Professor Marcus Reed. He's the only one who didn't sign Julian's loyalty letter last year. He knows something." "Maya, be careful." Sarah's voice was small and distorted over the speaker. "Julian is watching the network. I'm sorry. I should have encrypted your phone better, I'll add. Just tell me where he is, Sarah." "He's at the park on the edge of town. The one with the old trail. He's paranoid, Maya. He won't meet you anywhere else." The park was a desolate stretch of overgrown bushes and skeletal trees. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the grass. A single sodium lamp flickered at the end of the trail, its orange light pulsing like a dying heart. Maya walked toward the center of the clearing. The only sound was the rhythmic thunk of a distant swing set, the metal seats replaced with heavy industrial chains that clanked in the wind. "Professor Reed?" she whispered. A figure emerged from the shadows. But it wasn't the rumpled, ink-stained Marcus Reed. It was a man in a dark hoodie, his face obscured by a mask. He didn't speak. He just lunged. Maya screamed, swinging her heavy leather satchel. It caught the man in the chest, but he didn't slow down. He tackled her, his weight slamming her into a stone bench. The air left her lungs in a painful wheeze. She felt his hands move toward her throat, his fingers cold and smelling of grease. "Where is it?" he hissed, his voice a distorted growl. "The key. Give me the key." Maya struggled, her fingers clawing at the rough fabric of his mask. She reached into her bag, her hand closing around her thick, hardcover textbook on advanced statistical analysis. She swung it with every ounce of strength she had left. The corner of the book caught the man in the temple with a sickening thud. He groaned and slumped sideways. Maya didn't wait to see if he was conscious. She scrambled up and bolted into the dark woods, the branches tearing at her clothes like skeletal fingers. She tripped over a protruding root, her phone flying from her hand. She watched in horror as it skittered over the edge of a deep ravine, disappearing into the blackness below. "No," she sobbed. Her only line to Sarah, her only connection to the outside world. She crouched in the undergrowth, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. She was alone. She was hunted. And Julian Vance was winning. She stayed in the woods until the sun began to peek through the trees. She had to go home. She had to check on her mother. When she slipped through the back door of the Lexington house, the air felt heavy, stagnant. She heard a sound from the living room, the clink of a spoon against china. She crept to the doorway. Mary was sitting on the sofa, her eyes glazed and unfocused. On the coffee table sat a tray with a teapot and 2 cups. Julian was standing over her, his hand resting paternally on her shoulder. "Drink your tea, Mary," Julian said, his voice a syrupy caress. "It will help with the nerves. You've been so scattered lately." "I feel so tired, Julian." Mary's voice was a fading echo. "Is it Tuesday? It feels like a Tuesday." "It's whatever day you want it to be, my love," Julian whispered. Maya watched as Mary took a sip, her hand trembling. Within minutes, her head began to loll. Her eyes closed, and she slipped into a deep, unnatural sleep. Julian didn't move. He waited, his eyes fixed on Mary's face. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a legal document. He picked up Mary's limp hand, tucked a pen between her fingers, and guided her signature across the bottom of the page. Maya felt a surge of cold fury. He was stealing her mother's life, one signature at a time. She had to find out what that paper was. She waited until Julian went upstairs to rest. She crept into the living room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She snatched the paper from the table. It was a power of attorney. Julian now had total control over the Sterling estate. Every penny, every piece of property, every memory. She needed to find a place to hide the document, somewhere Julian wouldn't look. She ran to the laundry room, the scent of detergent and damp wool filling the small space. She shoved the paper behind the heavy washing machine, her fingers brushing against something hard and cold. She pulled it out. It was a leather-bound ledger, hidden in the gap between the machine and the wall. She opened it. It wasn't Julian's. It was a record of payments. Dozens of them, all made to a man named Silas Vane, private investigator. The header read. Maya flipped through the pages. Silas Vane wasn't just an investigator. He was a specialist in reputation management. And the most recent entries were all about her. But there was something else. A name from the past. Jennifer Miller. Maya's mind raced. Jennifer Miller was Julian's first wife, the one who had died in a car accident. Why was Julian paying an investigator for information on a dead woman? "Looking for something, Maya?" The voice was right behind her. Maya spun around, the ledger clutched to her chest. Julian was standing in the doorway, his silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his eyes dark with a sudden, violent intensity. "You're drugging her." Maya spat, her voice shaking. "You're stealing everything she has." Julian didn't answer. He stepped into the small room, his presence filling the space. He lunged, his hand closing around Maya's throat. He pinned her against the vibrating washing machine, his grip tightening until the world began to blur at the edges. "I have been very patient with you, Maya," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "I have tried to be the father you never had. But you are a stubborn, ungrateful child. I know about Jennifer," Maya wheezed, her hands clawing at his wrists. Julian's grip tightened. Jennifer was a mistake, a weak, fragile thing who didn't understand the value of what I was building. Don't make the same mistake, Maya. If you interfere with this wedding, if you say one word to your mother or the board, I won't just ruin you. I'll make sure you disappear, just like your father did. He threw her aside. Maya slumped to the floor, gasping for air, the cold linoleum biting into her skin. Julian smoothed his hair and adjusted his tie. "Come to the study, Maya," he said, his voice returning to its smooth, cello-like resonance. "I have something to show you. A final lesson in statistical certainty." Maya followed him, her legs feeling like lead. She had no choice. She was trapped in his house, under his rules. In the study, Julian sat behind his desk and turned his laptop screen toward her. Subverted Phase 1. Smart decision. Maya felt a flicker of hope. She had spent the last hour thinking about the offshore accounts. She knew that if she could just find the point of origin for the transfers, she could prove they were fraudulent. She had a plan. She would use Julian's own computer to access the bank's portal. She had memorized his keystrokes from weeks of observation. It was a brilliant, calculated risk, using the predator's own tools against him. She believed that if she could just show him that she had the digital trail, he would be forced to negotiate. She was being the master of data, the one who could solve any puzzle with enough information. Phase 2. False positive. Julian gestured to the keyboard. "Go ahead, Maya. Look at the accounts. I know you've been dying to." He leaned back, his hands clasped behind his head. Maya's fingers flew across the keys. She accessed the Sterling family savings account. Her breath caught in her throat. There it was, a series of massive deposits, totaling over $200,000. Each one was labeled consulting fees and originated from the university's grant fund. Maya felt a surge of triumph. "I have you," she whispered. "This is the proof of embezzlement. This is what you've been hiding." She looked at Julian, expecting to see fear. Instead, he looked almost proud. Phase 3. The crack, Maya began to scroll through the transaction details, looking for the authorization code. But something was wrong. The name on the recipient line wasn't Vance Holdings. It was Maya Sterling. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. She looked at the IP address used for the transfers. It was the same one from the library archives, the one she had used to download the records. A cold, hollow feeling opened up in her stomach. Phase 4. Full collapse. "Do you see the beauty of it, Maya?" Julian asked, his voice a soft, deadly hum. "The university is missing $200,000. And where did that money go? Directly into the personal savings account of the student who was caught breaking into the archives to find it." Maya stared at the screen, her vision tunneling. "No, I didn't. I never touched this money." "The digital receipts say otherwise," Julian said, his fingers moving to his knuckles. Pop, pop, pop. "And look at this." He opened an email draft. It was addressed to the University Ethics Board and the local police. It was a full confession, written in Maya's voice, detailing how she had stolen the money to pay off her mother's debts and how she had tried to frame Julian to cover her tracks. "I've already scheduled this to send tomorrow morning, 3 hours before the wedding rehearsal dinner. Unless, of course, you decide to be a good daughter and support our union." Maya felt the air leave the room. He hadn't just framed her. He had turned her own search for truth into the weapon of her destruction. If she spoke out, she would be arrested for the very crime she was trying to expose. She was the embezzler. She was the thief. And Julian was the victim. "You're a monster," she whispered. "I'm a survivor, Maya," Julian replied, shutting the laptop with a crisp, final snap. "And tomorrow, I become the head of this family. I suggest you go and find a dress. You wouldn't want to look unstable in front of the guests, would you?" The night of the board of directors' dinner was a blur of forced smiles and the clinking of silver against bone china. The house was filled with the elite of the university. Men like Richard Taylor, who carried sugar packets in his blazer and laughed too loudly at Julian's jokes. Maya stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she straightened the lace on her sleeves. She looked at her mother, who was drifting through the room like a ghost. Her upward inflected voice a constant, questioning hum. "Everything is so lovely, isn't it, Maya? The flowers, the wine." "Yes, Mom," Maya said, her voice a flat, dead thing. "Everything is perfect." She looked at Julian, who was holding court in the center of the room, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier. He was at the height of his power. He had the money, the house, the woman, and the perfect scapegoat. But Maya had one last variable. She had spent the previous night in the library stacks, not looking for financial data, but for university bylaws. She had found a loophole, a tiny, structural flaw in the way grant oversight was handled. She stepped into the dining room, carrying a silver tray with a single blue manila folder. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the laughter. "Before we toast the happy couple, I have a small gift for Julian. A joint asset wedding gift that I've had the university legal team review." The room went silent. Julian's eyes narrowed, his hand going to his knuckles. "Maya, this isn't the time." "Oh, but it is," Maya said, her voice gaining a sharp, clinical edge. She handed the folder to Richard Taylor. "Mr. Taylor, as the head of the finance committee, perhaps you could witness this? It's a formal acknowledgement of Julian's contribution to the Sterling estate, a way to ensure all assets are properly aligned." Richard Taylor adjusted his glasses, fumbling with a sugar packet. "Well, it seems standard. Wait, this clause here." Julian stepped forward, his face a mask of controlled rage. "What clause?" "The one that states that by signing this document, the recipient assumes sole legal and fiduciary responsibility for all transfers made from university grant accounts into the Sterling family holdings over the past 6 fiscal months." Maya said, her eyes fixed on Julian's. "It's a gesture of trust, Julian, to show the board that you are fully integrated into our finances." Julian hesitated. He was trapped. If he refused to sign in front of the board, it would look like he was hiding something. If he signed, he was taking responsibility for the very money he had planted in Maya's account. "It's just a formality, Julian," Dean Davis said, his low hum filling the silence. "To show the integrity you're always talking about." Julian took the pen. His hand was steady, but his eyes were burning. He signed the paper with a flourish. "There," he said, his voice a low growl. "Are you satisfied, Maya?" "Almost," Maya said. The front door opened. A woman stepped into the dining room. She was dressed in a nondescript gray suit, her hair short-cropped and sharp. She had a rigid, military-grade posture and eyes that scanned the room with a cold, professional intensity. Julian's face went white. The pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the mahogany table. "Jennifer?" he whispered. "Hello, Julian," the woman said. "It's been a long time. I believe you remember Silas Vane, the investigator you've been paying to make sure I stayed dead." She pulled a small digital recorder from her pocket and placed it on the table. "Maya and I have been talking. It turns out you've been using the same patterns for 20 years. The same offshore accounts, the same psychological games. But this time, you signed a confession." She looked at the board members. "My name is Jennifer Miller, and I'm here to discuss a 20-year-old accident and a very current theft." The room erupted into chaos. Richard Taylor dropped his sugar packets, the white crystals spilling across the Persian rug like snow. Dean Davis stopped humming, his face a mask of pure terror. Julian tried to run, but Kevin Wilson was standing in the doorway. The security guard didn't look at Julian. He looked at Maya, his hand tracing the scar on his eyebrow. He didn't move. He was no longer Julian's soldier. "The police are outside, Julian," Jennifer said. "And I think they'd like to see that document you just signed." Maya watched as the police led Julian away, his silver hair disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled. He didn't look like a predator anymore. He looked like a small, broken man who had finally run out of lies. The house in Lexington was quiet. The electronic hum of the security system had been silenced. The scent of sandalwood was fading, replaced by the fresh, crisp air of an open window. Maya sat in the garden, her heels sinking into the soft grass. She wasn't counting the stairs anymore. She wasn't aligning her pens. She was just breathing. Mary sat next to her, her eyes clear for the first time in months. She took Maya's hand. Her grip was firm, certain. "We're going to Boston, aren't we?" Mary asked. No question. A statement. "Yes, Mom," Maya said. "We're going to Boston." Maya looked at her reflection in the glass of the patio door. She didn't have to crouch to see her face anymore. She looked older, sharper, but there was a peace in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She had lost her dissertation, her academic path, and the perfect future she had planned. But as she watched the sun rise over the silent trees of Lexington, she realized she had found something more important. She had found her own voice. And for the first time in her life, she didn't need a number to tell her where she was standing. She was exactly where she needed to be.